of the cloud. And welcome to our GPS study. Tonight we're going on chapter 16. Now, chapter 16 is called No Choice. So I want to take us back to the foundation of what the Tanya is. If we remember the very beginning of Tanya, we talked about the theme of the entire Tanya is Kikarav Elecha Hadav Ma'id Beficha Uvilavacha Asaisei. That this entire Torah is close to us to be able to fulfill it in our hearts, in our minds, in our minds, and in our thoughts and in our speech, right? And thought, speech, and action. Bottom line. So, what we're talking about tonight is arousing enough of an understanding of the relationship that you know how to behave, and there's no choice, because if you know what you know, then you're going to do the right thing, right? That's the bottom line. So for that purpose, I want to start off with an interesting thought, right? And this thought is formed back from a book called The Five Love Languages. And the Five Love Languages talks about the theme of that book is, if I tell you I love you in French, I could tell you 100 times, but if you don't understand French, that didn't help. So his premise is, and the author of the book, his premise is that there's 5 basic love languages. One is auditory, verbal. One is gifts. It doesn't have to be expensive gifts, but just the idea that you're thought of. Another one is physical touch. Another one is quality time, and another's acts of service, right? But let's talk about this for a second. Let's say she likes tulips. He thinks roses are more impressive. What does he buy her?
Should buy her tulips. And probably thinks, well, no, she'll like the roses more anyway. So we say that way sometimes, yeah.
Right. So that becomes, are you doing, so what, you have to stop and think, hang a second, what's the purpose of the gift or act of service or whatever it is? Like, what's the purpose? Answer?
Please.
Judy, I didn't hear you.
To please somebody.
Is it to please them? Why do you want to please them?
Because you love them. So you want to tell them that you love them through a gift.
So the purpose then is to build a relationship, right? Yep. Whether it's an act of service or whether it's a gift, the point is that you want to build up the relationship. If I get her roses, knowing that she likes tulips, what's the message I gave?
That what you want is more important than what she wants.
And that is not a good way to build a relationship.
or more precisely, I know what's best for you. That's what it is.
Oh, that's even worse.
That's even worse.
I was giving him the benefit of the doubt.
What about the assumption of getting both? To say that it's a combination of the two of us.
That's also a nice message, as long as the message, but the bottom line is,
come with it.
Yeah, don't forget to make sure the message is actually being received. I tell my cadets all the time, you're responsible not only for what you say, but for what was heard. You need to confirm what was actually heard. So let me give you a different example, right?
Wait, isn't it the...
So let's say a spouse is allergic to oranges.
Huh. I know somebody.
So what is the message when not only do you avoid bringing oranges into the house, but that you make sure that wherever you're going to visit, that there are no oranges there in the house either? What's the message that's coming across?
You're taking care of that person.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. You love them and take care of them. My cousin's sister has two young children. The younger one is the boy. I think he's about maybe 8 or 9 right now. But he has a very strong allergy to peanuts, another allergy to peanuts. And even a couple of peanuts could send him into anaphylactic shock. So whenever they go out to eat, you check the menu, make sure, were there any peanuts used in this dish? was there any peanuts in the cookware or serving utensils? So
Peanut
that's
oil or
no,
things like
you
that,
know,
right?
yeah, because otherwise, because
Right.
that's happened to him a couple of times. So, yeah.
So that demonstrates the care, demonstrates the importance of the relationship, to the person that's going out of their way, right?
Mhm.
So that's the critical part. That's going to come very much a critical part of the concept of our class tonight is going to be about that idea of how to build up the relationship by the things that we do, bringing the right flowers, and the things that we don't do or avoid. That's going to be part of the message. Let's have another conversation, a different topic. The Talmud talks about the lowest creature in creation is the gnat,
Mhm.
because it's the only thing that takes from this world, but it doesn't give back. It doesn't even leave excrement to fertilize with. So it literally doesn't give a. So
Yeah.
that's the gnat. So the Talmud
Mhm.
uses the gnat as the example of the lowest in creation. On the other hand, the Talmud says that a person who goes against God, who commits a sin, big or small, is going against God. The gnat, as repulsive as it is still doing what God wants it to do. It is fulfilling its relationship with God. It's doing what it was created to do. A person who goes against God is worse than that, because the message is coming across that I don't care what you want. I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah.
So that's an even worse step, right? So let's dive into the chapter itself. Again, chapter 16, it says it's called No Choice. The quote from Tanya is that transgressing God's will separates us from him. The awareness of that the awareness can activate our capacity for self-sacrifice for all the mitzvahs, from the lightest to the most severe. What we're going to walk away with from the chapter is the idea that if I know that the relationship is important to me, and I know that I would, if I was asked to bow down to an idol, I would not bow down to an idol. Well, if I realize that every time I do something against God, it's as if I'm bowing down to an idol, because I'm stepping away from that relationship. Doesn't matter how big or how small. It's the direction I'm going. And that awareness can help us stop and say, hang on a second. The next thing I do, is that going to build my relationship, or is that going to sever my relationship even a little bit? Which direction do I want to be going in this? And that's the purpose we want, is because to be able to be cognizant of our actions to the degree that they are all affecting our relationship with God, and where we want to be going with that, right? So we look at the chapter, we talk about the idea that the mitzvah, it's not this shallow interpretation. Like, when you're in school, when you're a kid, things have to be black and white, right? And so either I passed the test or I failed the test. Every time you're testing me is about, me passing or failing, right? Well, what if the testing is about the relationship? It's not about pass and fail. It's about uniting us or separating us. All right. So we should not take the mitzvahs as this, this immature relationship of, I do I obey or do I disobey? That's very shallow. It's more about, do I do things to draw us closer together, or am I doing things that draw us apart from each other? And that's the distinction, right? Because if you're looking at, is it pushing us apart or drawing us closer, then it doesn't matter whether it's a small or a large thing. It's the direction we're going.
Mm.
And again, we talked about the example of the klipa, right? So the soul is invested within, the godly soul is invested within the body. And so wherever I take this body, whatever I do with this body, I'm dragging the godly soul along with it. Do I drag this godly soul with me into holy and good things? Or am I dragging this body into places it doesn't want to go? Every little sin that takes us apart means that I'm taking this body, this physical body, and taking it away from God as well. Bowing down to an idol is like this big red line that says, okay, I know that bowing down to an idol is crossing the line. That's like an obvious, no question about it, right? But on the more subtle things, on the everyday little things, is the next action something that's going to draw me closer to God and build our relationship? Or is it taking me the opposite direction? We always had that idea of two people are on the ladder. One is 10 steps from the top, and the other one is like 3 steps from the bottom. So which one is doing better? Well, wait a minute. Which
Yes.
direction are they going? The guy could be at the top, but if he's moving down, that's not a good thing, right? Guy may be on the 3rd step, but he's moving up, so that's a good thing. So that red line, and that don't cross that red line, that red line is a huge warning sign. But if we could be cognizant of which direction are we going, that's even more important. Oftentimes we're like asleep. We're like not even aware of what we're doing. And it only comes up when we get close to that red line. It only comes up when we're about to step into a place where like, oh, this is really bad. Right? Then we wake up and we say, this is not the direction I want to be going. We want to be thinking about it long before that. To the degree that we're looking at, is the next step I take, the next action I do, is it heading towards that red line and crossing the wrong line? Or am I just drawing closer and closer to God? It was an interesting thing where he shares an example here that there was a chassid who was doing outreach to people, and someone was like, why don't you just mind your own business? Leave me alone. Why don't you mind your own business, right? And he explained that the entire Jewish people are one. We're like one Torah scroll, right? And a Torah scroll, if there's a single letter missing from a Torah scroll, the whole Torah scroll is puzzle. Right? So if there's a letter missing or a letter that gets erased, it affects the whole scroll. And therefore, to be whole, we need everyone involved. So at some point he asked the Rebbe this example that he gave. How was this example? And the Rebbe strongly enforced to him that actually, no, it's not. A Jew is not like an ink on parchment that can be erased or fade with age. It's not so. A Jew is more like the engraving on the tablets. It's ingrained. It's a part of. It's inseparable. It may get covered over, and it may get filled in with schmutz, but all it needs is a little dusting off and cleaning. It's never separate from, it's never missing. And that's the distinction, is that godly soul that's within us is always a part of everything we do. Are we taking it closer to God, the animal soul? Are we taking it closer to God, or are we dragging the godly soul farther away from God? Single thing we do. So when it comes to bowing down to an idol, everybody knows that's crossing the line. But do we wait for that point, or do we realize that bringing roses instead of tulips is already heading down the wrong track? You're not building up the relationship, right? Everything we're doing, including the things which are the lois aseh, we're avoiding doing something because that would be displeasing to God. that would be a detriment to our relationship, right? I know you don't like oranges and you're allergic to oranges or peanuts, right? Or whatever the example is, but I want them. Well, that's actually pretty devastating to a relationship because it clearly shows that you're not interested in the relationship. So you may think, I'm just doing my own thing, right? No, you're actually impacting the relationship, and it makes a big difference. And if we can internalize this idea that every step we take, every decision that we make, is this bringing us closer to God? Is this in building our relationship, or is this detrimental to the relationship? Then it's no longer about crossing the line, but it's about, are we drawing closer or moving apart? And if we take that attitude about everything that we do, then it becomes much easier and in a sense much more obvious that we're willing to sacrifice ourselves or our desires or what's important to us in order to draw closer to God. We may have a desire to eat something that's not kosher, or to do something that's inappropriate, or even to say something that's not nice to someone. And how will that affect our relationship with God? You know, our parents teach us that you do something wrong, you have to apologize. Even if you don't feel like it, you still have to apologize. Because the word spoken will help to arouse the feeling as well. And the word spoken also helps break the ego. And that already is a step closer, because you're showing that you value something more than just your own feelings or thoughts, or your own self. And that draws us closer to God. So being able to be aware of, are we drawing closer or separating ourselves in that relationship? And that's when we talk about the mitzvah of saying Shema Yisrael. We say Shema Yisrael morning and night, right? We say the Shema Yisrael prayer. What is the Shema Yisrael prayer? The Shema Yisrael prayer is declaring God's unity, that there is nothing else but God. Hashem Echad. There is only God. There is nothing else. And by declaring that morning and night, we are drawing closer to God by acknowledging that unity with God, that there is nothing outside of God, and we're strengthening that relationship every time we say it. Now, by the way, touching base on halacha, right? We say Shema in the morning, we say Shema in the evening. There's a time frame on that. As with many mitzvahs, there's constraints on that. What does it mean in the morning, right? Well, the Shema of the morning is said after dawn. There are people who go to work before dawn. The old in the old Talmudic world, it was people like butchers, or chickens are laying their eggs at that early hour, right? That's the time to be gathering them. So people are going to work before dawn, haven't had a chance to daven properly. There used to be minyanim of the guys who, they all went to work before dawn, and now it's coming the mid-morning break, and then they get together to daven, right? Because now the sun is up. They didn't get a chance to daven before they came to work. So when is the time for saying Shema? From dawn until the first third of the day. Well, what is the first third of the day? Well, if we're looking at a Jewish calendar, we're not counting the dates, the hours by 60 minutes to an hour. A Jewish calendar looks at how many hours are there in the day, divide that up into 12, and each one of those is considered an hour. So you could have a 53-minute hour, you could have a 68-minute hour. Depends on what time of year it is and the location that you're in, which is why the Shabbos candlelighting time is always changing, because it depends on which part of the time zone are you in, and which latitude and which longitude. But the idea is it's the third out from the beginning of dawn until the third hour of the day. The Gemara, the Mishnah, the Gemara, that talks about that as what is the third hour of the day? That's the day of when princes wake up. The princes that lead a royal lifetime, they have an active evening, but they sleep in. So they're not getting up until 9:30 or something, 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning, right? So the winter hours, that can be like 9:15 or 9:30 in the morning. In the summer hours, when the days are much longer, that could be as late as 10 o'clock or 10:15, depending on where you live, right? So there's a time frame for saying the Shema in the morning as well as in the evening, that it's already after sundown, but before the dawn comes up. Best time is the first third of the evening. So, but we get into the details of the mitzvah. Well, why is it so important that we deal with the details of the mitzvah? Like, why can't we just, bring tulips, or why can't we just bring roses, right? Well, again, it comes down to, are you trying to build the relationship where what God wants actually matters to you, or you want to bring what you want to bring to the relationship? And again, we all know that relationships is all about the giving and not the taking, and the caring about someone else more than yourself. And that's the same in our relationship with God. If we actually care about what God wants, then we want to do it to the specifications that he requests. Not that he's being anal retentive about it or something, but if we want to please, we want to know what is it that he wants. And so the Torah tells us what he's looking for. And the more we understand the depth of all of that, it makes a lot of sense as well.
Does that tie in then with Cain and Abel? Because when Abel the shepherd brought his offerings, Hashem accepted it. When Cain brought his, he was a farmer, so he brought his offerings, but they were not of the best quality, so Hashem rejected those. And I think Cain became very jealous of Abel and slew his brother for that.
Right. It all began with, one was looking to bring the best of what he had to give to share with God. And the other one was, it's all getting burned anyway, I can give him the bad stuff. Well, yeah, how's that going for your relationship, right?
But that's like regifting or secondhand stuff. Yeah.
Right. So that's the thing, is that, are we looking to bring something that we want to give, or are we looking at something that the other person will appreciate? And the more we're focused on what pleases the other person, the stronger that relationship becomes, especially if it's a two-way street, right? So again, with our relationship with God, we don't need to wait till we're up to that red line to stop and say, oh, maybe I should work on my relationship with God. If we realize that it's not an obedience test, but rather it's a relationship, then we can think about, wow, if it came down to bowing down to an idol, I would rather give up my life than bow down to an idol, because my relationship with God is important to me. Well, is it important to me enough to not eat the stuff that's not kosher? All right, let's make it even tougher. Is it important enough to me to put my own self aside sometimes, my own conveniences aside? Is it important enough for me that after I've had a long, hard night and I'm sleeping in, is it important enough for me to make sure I get up, set my alarm clock to make sure that I actually get up, wash my hands, and say Shema at the right time, because it actually matters to God? Am I willing to do that?
What happens if circumstances don't allow you to? For instance, I work nights. I'm not always home in time to do the Shema. I've been doing it late. Am I in trouble for doing it late? Is that bringing me further away, or?
So if your husband was out shopping and he actually didn't bring tulips, he brought roses because they didn't have any tulips. How would you feel?
Fine with the roses.
Okay, you got your answer, right?
Okay.
Now, having said that, the Shema Yisrael, just Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam Voed.
Yeah.
You don't have to have a long period of time or even a book to say it out of.
You don't know where I work. Last time I was on, I got home at around 10:30 because we were holding kids down who wanted to bang through the wall with their heads. No,
So
I was
while-
not able to do the Shema.
But if you find, so the answer is
Uh-huh.
fine. When you get home, you'll say it, and God
Yes, I
understands,
did.
right?
Okay.
On the other hand, you could also be doing your work and thinking, while I'm restraining this patient, I can say Shema. I
I
won't
don't
have,
think you've ever tried to do that with a patient that has,
I'm saying, but you hear what I'm saying,
I do.
is
Yeah.
that you could say, listen, I know I don't have the proper calm to say the prayer in the way I want to say it,
Mm-hmm.
but I know God wants it at a certain time. Let me say it now as best I can, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
say it again later
Okay.
when I have more concentration. I can do
Okay.
both.
All
Now,
right.
having said that, the Shema at night
Mm-hmm.
is any time from sundown
Mm-hmm.
until dawn.
That's handy.
If you
That
can do
works
it,
a lot better in my life.
if you can do it before that third hour of the night, which is around midnight or 1 a.m., somewhere between midnight and 1 a.m., if you can say it before then, that's better. But the time is the whole night. The Shema of the morning is the one where we have more of a stricture of time, which is from dawn
Mm-hmm.
until the third hour, which is around 9:30 or 10, depending on
Mhm.
the season, right?
Yep.
That's more important. But again, you could say Shema with in Halach in the Mishnah, it talks about can you say your, well, they're talking really about Shemona Esrei, the whole Shemona Esrei prayer, but can you say Shemona Esrei when you're on a horse,
Mm-hmm.
or do you
That's
have
gonna
to
be
get
my
off,
next question.
right?
Good question.
I didn't know we had a horse.
So the answer is, how well can you concentrate, right? So if you're climbing, if your job is harvesting coconuts, right? And this is an example. This is actually an example, right? If your job is harvesting coconuts,
Uh-huh.
then you can't say the Shema up in the coconut tree, because your mind won't at all be on the Shema, on the Shemona Esrei, the prayers, the length of your prayer, not just Shema, but the length of your prayer, because you're in a place of sakana, of danger, right? But if it's an oak tree that you're in, and you can sit comfortably on a branch and have time to focus, then so you could say the whole prayer then up in that position, because you're secure enough to be able to say it with concentration. What's the level of concentration? So again, the beauty of the question is not so much the detail of when coconut tree or an oak tree or whatever. It's more about what's the best way to do the mitzvah. What's the best way to connect with God? That becomes more of what the question is. Anil?
So how does that work with the bedtime Shema? Like if you skip the nighttime Shema, but you did the bedtime one, does that kind of cover the one for the evening?
There are some locations in the world where Shabbos doesn't begin
Uh-huh.
until horribly late.
Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine making Kiddush at 11, 12 at night?
Yeah.
Because that's now when the sun has finally set,
Yeah.
right? So Maariv evening services will be done at a more normal hour.
Okay.
And Shabbos Kiddush and the meal can begin early, because you're allowed to start Shabbos early.
Uh-huh.
But you'll make sure that you say the Shema prayer before going to bed after it's dark.
Okay. Okay.
I'll give an example. In England, there are times in England during the summer
Uh-huh.
where you're talking about Shabbos beginning at like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah.
And so people will do their evening services at a normal hour. They'll make Kiddush, they'll begin Shabbos early, and they'll keep all the laws of Shabbos,
Mm-hmm.
and they'll stay up long enough to make sure that they can say Kriya Shema
Oh,
at
okay.
night. They
Okay.
get the mitzvah in, and then they go to bed.
Okay.
Now, what about Saturday when Shabbos is out? There are people who will go to sleep
Yeah.
Saturday night and have daven to Mariv and everything else, but they didn't conclude Shabbos. They went to bed.
Yeah.
And they get up in the morning and they make Havdalah then.
Really?
Because it's so late.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
you're certainly not gonna keep the kids up until 11 o'clock at night for them to hear Havdalah, right?
That's interesting.
make
I
Havdalah
never
the
really
next day.
thought about that different time zones. I'm just used to this time zone. So, yeah.
Time zones can really mess with you.
Yeah.
What if you're living in Alaska, at the northernmost end of Alaska, and you actually don't get a night,
Mhm.
Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
right? You could have 6 months of summer and 6 months of winter, right? You don't have the halacha is that you go by the times of the closest location that actually does have a day and night.
Oh, okay.
So even though you may be all the way at the top of Alaska, you could be going by Anchorage times.
Okay.
And when we had a sailor who texted in, he said, "I am eastbound across the Pacific, and Saturday, and I will cross the international date line Saturday night. I'm going to go from Shabbos into Shabbos. How do I do this?"
Yeah.
Very carefully.
And the halacha is that you go by the zmanim of the port you left. So he's going by the Shabbos is a 25-hour day, no matter where you are, it's a 25-hour period. So he went by the Sydney Times until he hits port in San Francisco. He's going by Sydney time,
Oh, okay.
which was a very valuable piece of Talmudic information when the astronauts left to go around the room, because okay, wait a second. I am going to circle the globe. Like, how do I put on my tefillin, take off my tefillin, put on my tefillin, take off my tefillin, put on my tefillin?
It's every 90 minutes it goes around the world.
Yeah, right?
90 minutes. Yeah.
So the answer is you calculate your prayers and everything else and Shabbos from the place you took off. So you've left at Cape Canaveral, you are on Cape Canaveral time the entire time you're in space.
Oh, okay. That's cool. I would have never thought that.
But remember, the question is, how do I build on my relationship with God? What does God want? Tulips or roses? What pleases him best? That's my question. And that's what building up the relationship is all about. That's the question, which is why there's a sefer, there's a fascinating sefer. There are people in the Holocaust, in death camps, who brought very unique questions to the rabbi in the death camp. Hanukkah is coming, do we say Shechianu? Rosh Hashanah is coming, do we say Shechianu? Thank God that I'm kept alive to this season. How do you thank God when you're living in a death camp?
You're living.
The fact that we ask the question, do I say Shechianu or not? It doesn't matter what the answer is the rabbi gives. The fact that they cared enough to ask the question, what would God want from me in this time and place? The person could be focused 100% on just trying to stay alive, and yet they stop and ask, what does God want from me under this circumstance? Wow.
Yeah.
And a rabbi, he kept these questions and answers, because over the years, throughout the centuries, rabbis have kept their shilos and chuvas, the questions they were asked and the answers they gave, and this gives later generations a better understanding of what previous rabbis have said under different circumstances. That helps us to inform how we should be doing in our own circumstances, right?
Mm.
So we just gave the example. What do the astronauts do? Well, what are the people who went on board ship that were gone for 6 months? Like, what do they do? So you have to find out what the rabbi said in previous generations to understand what we want. So this guy in the death camp, he kept on little strips of paper or pen, whatever he could, to record these, and he had them kept in a coffee can, an empty coffee can, buried under the boards of one of the barracks. And when they were freed, he grabbed these and he took them with him. And the book that was printed was called Min HaMetzar, from the depths, from the deepest pit, from the depths of hell. All right, shilos and chuvas, questions and answers from the depths of hell. And again, it's fascinating to see what the answers that the rabbis gave, but more important is to know, in those circumstances, Jews wanted to know, what would God like me to do in this circumstance? That they cared about their relationship with God, even in worse than hell. That is amazing. That's awesome. And so if we stop and think to ourselves, I certainly wouldn't bow down to an idol. I would certainly give up my life, to serve God, not to do that. So then the question becomes, am I willing to give up my comfort zone to get out of bed in time to say Shema? Or not to eat and drink in that hour between when sunset comes and we light the Shabbos candles, and not to eat or drink anything, even water, until after we make Kiddush, because that makes the Kiddush even more holy and sanctified, because I didn't eat or drink until that time, right? What are the ways that we can, honor God? And if it inconveniences us, are we still willing to do that? So it's all about the relationship. Are we drawing closer in the relationship, or are these things showing that I really don't care about the relationship? And that helps us every step of the way to make the right decisions and to really be focused on our relationship with God, building that relationship with God, and withstanding not only the big tests, but even the small temptations, because it's all about that relationship. So, chapter 16, what do you walk away with?
I will try very hard not to let my wife lick a cracked coconut when she thinks automatically to do that, which she did. She is deathly allergic to coconuts. So we're in the store, and my daughter and I, we like coconuts. So we had one, and it dropped on the floor, and Judy picks it up, and it's cracked and it's leaking, and she goes with her finger like, and I say, Judy.
Then
So
I
no
took
lime in the-
Benadryl.
No lime in the coconut in this house.
Yes, exactly. So it's that concern, yes. And to take that same understanding and apply that to our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch, with the Holy One, blessed be He. Arousing those thoughts and emotions.
I take away a different way to ask questions.
Give more. Discuss that a little more.
Yeah.
My questions always were, all right, how do I know? I would know by either looking at Torah myself, which doesn't always give me the answers, or asking a rabbi. But it never occurred to me to think, okay, how would this affect the relationship?
Exactly.
It's a different way to ask questions.
Completely different way to ask questions. Yeah. And we think about that. I mean, those of us with kids, you think about that in the children, helping build children's relationships as well. right?
Mhm.
If I'm only reprimanding all the time, is that really helping them grow up and be better people? How do I build this relationship and not just command what they should or shouldn't do, right? How do we build the relationship? And how do we help our children build a relationship? You know, it's interesting. The parent-child relationship. Why does the Torah tell us that a child has to honor their parents? This is the stepping stone by which you then learn how to have a relationship with God. A person who has a dysfunctional relationship at home, how do you expect the relationship to God to be? That can't be too healthy. They have to fix their interpersonal relationships to be able to understand what a relationship really is about, to be able then to extend that to something which is more metaphysical. And the opposite. And the opposite. This is the fascinating part of it. King Solomon's Shir HaShirim. You know, if you look at the story, it's a love story, right? You could really read it as a love novel, but he's talking about God and the Jewish people.
Mhm.
It's all about the relationship.
Well, isn't in a way the Torah from Mount Sinai? It's like for the covenant. It's like a ketubah for the covenant. It's a contract
Absolutely.
between the groom Hashem and the bride, the Jewish people.
I am to my beloved as my beloved is to me.
It's to me.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
But doesn't it go further back to the understanding that the Torah says that from even the commandments to respect? I mean, when it talks about respect your father and your mother, it's taking it even further to respect all Jewish people. And if you don't have the proper respect, even from that basis, how are you going to have a good relationship?
Absolutely. And it goes even farther back to with Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve in Gan Eden. And again, it all comes back down to a relationship thing. And you know, what do we do and don't do? What do we do and what do we don't do to build a relationship? The active things that help build us, and the things that are the inactive things of don't do this because that will impact our relationship.
Yeah. Well, my understanding, putting that into full, I don't know if I understand correctly or entirely, as I would like to. When you wind the tefillin strap around your arm 7 times, then you take it and you wrap it around your middle finger, and when you do that, I can't remember exactly how it goes right now unless I'm actually doing it. You betroth yourself. You betrothed. I'm saying it right?
Yeah,
To
yeah,
Hashem
yeah.
when you do that. That's what wrapping that part is. That's what it means.
Right. And so in a betrothal sense, you know, it's like the wedding ring around the finger,
Yeah.
right? That's a piece of it. But
Yeah.
also it's so much more than that, because the bicep is the sign of human strength,
Yeah.
right? And we bind that with a leather harness, that we're harnessing this animal, this physical animal, me, and we're binding that, harnessing that to the service of God. The gross motor skills all the way down to the fine motor skills are all being harnessed to the service of God. Put a strap on the head that the intellect is being harnessed, right hemisphere and left hemisphere, and knotted at the cortex where the decision making is, to where we go all the way down to the straps hang all the way down to our legs, that where we go is in the service of God. So the whole tefillin experience is all about harnessing this animal, gross motor skills, fine motor skills, the heart, which is the tefillin sits right next to the heart, the intellect, both sides of the intellect, decision making, all the way down to the feet where we're going. All of that is being harnessed to the service of God. And that's how we start every day, is harnessing this animal to the service of God. There's an example given in this section of the Torah of the Tanya of, you know, how low can you go, right?
Mhm.
And the example that's given in Tanya is, if this animal soul drags the godly soul into sin, it could be compared to taking the king and sticking his head into a toilet. It's the most offensive thing you can do,
Mm.
is you're pulling the godly soul away from its relationship with the divine.
Mhm.
And if we put it in that perspective, it helps us realize, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do anything that disrespects God or disrespects my relationship with God. I don't want to go there. And so understanding it in this deeper level helps us to make sure that we don't go there.